Chapter 3, The Misuse of Social Justice and the Great Divide. Because of our politically charged climate, this is going to be a difficult and controversial chapter. My goal is to show how terms like equity and social justice are being misused by many districts to further justify test score shaming and blaming teachers for all behavior issues. Before going on further, we need to talk about the Great Divide in our country and how it sidelines education issues. One thing most can agree with is that in the last 4 years, not only does it feel like we live in two different countries, but two different worlds and two different realities. Yet, regardless of political beliefs, when I explain what has been going on in schools, people across all walks of life are shocked and furious about what has been happening. The problem I have found time and time again is that people simplify education issues in order to justify their own political beliefs. Thus, people assume the answer to education issues, and really to everything, is to get their political tribe to win. This means choosing a tribe and destroying anyone who disagrees with you. Welcome to the Thunderdome. And so often we cater to the worst aspects of our tribe. Purity tests, inquisitions that rout out heresies, insane conspiracy theories, endless internet trolling, the list goes on. And as is usual, the voice and struggles of the average teacher is zoned out by political pundits, admin, and some academics. So many with little to no teaching experience, yet all claim to be fighting for the teachers by not listening. Folks, I could go on and on about this, but really what I'm asking you to do is keep an open mind about the direction of this chapter, and really the entire video, because we teachers can't afford to have our education issues marginalized into tribal categories. My intention is not to demonize the use of social justice as a lens for viewing education issues, nor do I want to chase away those worried about its use in school. My intention is to try to show how movements in education towards equity, equality, social justice, and anti-racism can be misused and warped into reinforcing the exact system they are supposed to be challenging. I want to further show how any movement can just as easily be warped when those in positions of power are untouchable, as will be detailed in our next chapter. What I ask is that we look beyond tribal politics and consider the bigger picture of how the education system reinforces itself. I want to position the misuse of social justice within the long-standing teacher accountability movement. To do this, let's roll back 20 years to the No Child Left Behind Act, passed in 2001. Interestingly, passed by both conservatives like George W. Bush and liberals like Ted Kennedy. This act really pushed standardized tests into hyperdrive, as so-called failing schools had to show major improvements in test scores, or inevitably risk closing. The act's name was brilliant in terms of propaganda. I mean, who would want to leave a child behind? But more so, it identified the problem/scapegoat, those lazy public teachers and their evil unions. Charter schools were viewed as the heroes that could pump out higher test scores and end the achievement gap. But the greater picture was that all teachers could not be trusted to raise scores and thus needed endless accountability measures to hold them to higher standards. So-called bad schools with bad teachers who brought low test scores were treated like an unprofitable business location that could be closed if profits/test scores didn't improve. Remember Coach B, endlessly collecting data at soccer practice. Same thing with teachers in so-called bad schools. Gradually, the public turned sour on how much testing was being done. Yet note that even today, the concern still is how much testing is done, not what is being tested. By 2015, public opinion had been swayed enough by testing horror stories of teachers that No Child Left Behind was effectively replaced. But its shadow lives on in current policies. Districts have been able to continue the same teacher bashing and test score shaming by positioning low test scores as a social justice issue, while completely ignoring the trivial and damaging nature of the tests. The game is the same, but the lingo has changed. With No Child Left Behind, it was bad test score equals bad teacher. Now it's bad test scores equals prejudiced teacher who's not teaching with equity and social justice in mind. Here's a question. What does pumping out 15 nonsense words in a minute have anything to do with social justice? Nothing, of course. If anything, these obsessive tests are a social justice issue as they destroy schools. Now we get into propaganda and data manipulation. Just like with Coach B's soccer team, admins state that these skills tested must be mastered, specifically to dismantle the achievement gap between white students and students of color. Thus, admin have a new role to make sure that there are no test score gaps between students. This is based mostly on race/ethnicity, but also on gender. Admin get to interpret test scores to see which teacher is failing which demographic group, then demand training to address failures. I want to pause briefly to note the hypocrisy in all this. Generally speaking, any movement concerned with equity, equality, or social justice would revolve around challenging oppressive systems. Yet, in the name of social justice, admin reinforce the same system that forces teachers to teach to the test all year long, while still getting after teachers for not having lesson plans that are fun, engaging, meaningful, culturally responsive, and so on. There's a paradox in all this that's best illustrated in an example. Let's say there's a 5th grade teacher who connects her class lessons to real-world issues that interest her kids. The kids and parents love it, and the kids are learning a lot. But all this time this teacher is spending being a good teacher is time not spent training for trivial skills on standardized tests. Though this teacher has very much taught with social justice in mind, her class scores are lower than others on state testing, even though the real learning in her class is far superior to others. Sure enough, this teacher gets blasted by admin, who state that test scores would have been higher if this teacher was truly connecting her lesson plans to social justice issues. The teacher is absolutely demoralized, but the story doesn't end yet. The other 5th grade teachers are veterans who know how the district works, and thus made sure to train hard on tested skills. Sure enough, these teachers' high test scores win them praise from admin for tackling the achievement gap and teaching with social justice in mind, which they never actually did because of test score demands. The final insult comes to the younger 5th grade teacher when admin asked the 2 veteran teachers to mentor her on implementing social justice issues into her class. The veteran teachers are very nice about it and explain that they used to do the same thing she did, but it's turned into a matter of survival. If you have low test scores, admin will come after you and force you to use specific interventions and collect even more data. Thus, like so many districts, teaching for social justice means not teaching about social justice issues at all. Admin hypocrisy is far more visible when it comes to behavior. Everything discussed in the last chapter is supposedly based on social justice, meaning keeping suspensions and office referral numbers down to create the illusion of progress, regardless of the effect it has on classes, students, and teachers. Admins see almost all behaviors as misunderstandings by the teacher that need to be corrected through bias training and adoption of district-approved Band-Aid strategies for behavior. Many of these behavior strategies aren't bad, they're just not meant to be miracle strategies that cure meltdowns and temper tantrums. Let's consider the call and response strategy, popular in many churches, which actively involves the whole class giving responses, rather than sitting quietly and having everyone take turns by raising their hand. It's a great strategy, but can be used many different ways, but it's not meant to erase severe mental health issues or special education needs. It's important to note that to admin, social justice means catering your entire class to the student with the biggest behavior issues. All routines, rules, and lessons should be built around pacifying the student. The rest of the class is essentially non-existent, yet admin will promote the falsehood that they want to meet all, meaning one, of the student's needs. Admin want to paint the picture that their district refuses to give up on any student, but the teachers know that admin have given up on almost all students except the most extreme behaviors. With admin's thinking, the more severe the behavior, the more misunderstood the student is. There's absolutely no accountability for student behavior, as every kid is a victim of their teacher and the classroom environment. Note that even the most basic understanding of social justice should conclude that a class cannot function when a student is having 5 meltdowns a day. But again, the worse the behavior, the more of a victim the student is, and the more training all teachers need. It's important to note that training for any job is vital, but so often it's impossible for teachers to take district workshops and training sessions seriously when the teacher ignores what is happening in the classroom and furthermore is used as a weapon to silence opposition. So many trainings are treated almost like Maoist struggle sessions, where teachers are encouraged to confess their prejudices and their failings in the classroom. Worse than just being ineffective, these training sessions can push teachers away from important education issues due to how they're presented and who is presenting. Considering everything discussed in this video, I want you to pretend you're a teacher. Now consider how serious you would take a district training session on social justice, knowing the district only cares about test scores and suspension rates. Even if the training session was good, you'd know full well the district is just using this as a justification for more teacher bashing. Teachers generally tend to be a more progressive group, but you can understand why so many teachers are sour towards district initiatives that claim to be rooted in social justice. They have nothing to do with social justice and do a huge amount of damage to the many teachers and educators who are truly trying to change the test score factory system. Consider, if I stepped on your toe every time you said social justice, regardless of what you thought about social justice, you'd quickly develop a negative reaction to the term. And so it is for us. I want to note something interesting about this chapter. The whole thing is about social justice misuse, yet there's very little about social justice issues and how they should look in class. I did this on purpose, not to disrespect so many of us educators who are serious about it as a movement, but to show that when equity and social justice are used like a temporary fad, they can easily be replaced by other terms or movements to promote the same teacher bashing and test score shaming. As a thought experiment, I'm going to wave a magical wand, and all of a sudden, the terms equity and social justice are replaced by freedom and liberty. The district now has training sessions on freedom and liberty, and expects these implemented in lesson plans. What changes? Absolutely nothing. The purpose is only to pump out test scores. Interestingly, as with social justice, any understanding of freedom should lead towards more classroom freedom. But sure enough, it's just a new term, but more of the same. The district could even adopt the terms puppies and sunshine as the new fads, and these terms would still be used to reinforce the existing system. In closing this chapter, my hope is that we can push aside tribal politics and understand how school districts can manipulate any movement or current terms in order to reinforce their existing policies that have done so much damage to teachers and students. In the next chapter, we'll discuss why it's often so easy for school boards, superintendents, and their fellow cronies to keep getting away with this.